Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm Dana and we're going to kick this off with a song from James Lucett's YouTube channel, which is Corium Records. He's a company and it's called Radioactive Hudson. And I'll be right back. We got 26 dead killer whales, the most in history, period. We only have 6 stories reporting on it. We have 2 viewers. The biggest die-off in the history of killer whales deserves a bit more prominence, you would hope, than this. And the reason it gets no prominence is because the nuclear industry can't handle the truth. I'll be right back.
Radioactive Hudson, Indian Point, the record done. 60 years along the bed. The plan is closed, but not the end. The Hudson boy, the daily waste, outfalls hidden, years erased. Permit signed, the crowd objected. Federal law kept it protected. Now old tech owns the side entire. Fuel and waste, the slow expire. 45,000 gallons stored. The court unlocked the outlet door. Radioactive Hudson, burning core. Old tech claims the dose is short. State declared the bill was passed, save the Hudson, make it last. But old Tech sued, the bench complied. The NRC will now decide. A law once meant to guard this stream was overruled in a legal scheme. Dolphin, surface, sturgeon, swam, milligram counts can't show their path. Radioactive Hudson, hurting core. Old Tech claims the dose is short. Oh, 45,000 gallons sent away. The Hudson bears it by day, by day. They call it common, done before. Wastewater carried to the shore. Millennium tallies claim it's small, but none of that explains it all. The irony sharp, the ruling clear. Rights revised to serve Holtec here. Radioactive Hudson, hurting core. Holtec claims the dose is short. 45,000 gallons sent away. The Hudson bears it day by day. Say the Hudson, the voice is cold. The river bears the weight of all. From Buchanan to the Bay, Families live with what they say. 60 years the plant was wrong. The Hudson keeps what's been undone.
Hello, everybody. 26 dead killer whales. Very sketchy pictures. All of them, except for a few, were from long distances. Like, it's hard to wrap your mind around the story. So I'll walk you through it. There's a lot of connecting going on here. So the nuclear industry had broken the food chain 80 years ago, but Fukushima was a pulse event. It was 4 reactor buildings with 8 fuel pools and 36 reactor cores estimated that were lost into the environment. The reactor cores each were equivalent to 100 Chernobyls. Chernobyl was a graphite reactor, was a new reactor, was a small reactor, didn't have fuel pools at the top of the buildings. Japan's reactors were pure uranium, pure plutonium, and they had 3 decades plus of reactor cores stored at the top of the buildings. It was 4 buildings in a row, lost their entire inventories. The plumes were spiked, the radioactive fallout spiked worldwide. In the United States and Canada, the French government showed a spike of 1 million, not an estimate, not a opinion, not a conjecture, but an actual spike of 1 million to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air. This is based on 23 days of radioactive fallout. It's the French government. You can see the entire planet. So we broke the food chain because of this. And now we're seeing a cascade effect. What was interesting about this story in particular, besides the fact it's the biggest mass die-off of species in killer whales, orcas, in human history. The biggest mass die-off in human history. I know this is an unusual time for the shows. There's reasons for everything. I usually do mine 10 p.m. nighttime, my time. So you can see some of the whales are spread out. The tide has gone out. There's a big tide exchange. Killer whales have a long history of chasing seals and sea lions up onto beaches. They're very familiar with shallow water. They're not naive. They're not gullible. They're extremely intelligent. They're considered the most intelligent. They eat up to 240 known species. The close-up pictures that they did release, was very few of them. There were 6 stories, and the biggest die-off of killer whales in human histories deserve a bit more prominence than that, I would hope. They're there in their paper suits or whatever, allegedly doing autopsies. And so they show you these pictures. This is several days after the whales have died, and they're in different stages of decomposition. There were 6 medias, and the medias all mentioned 2 government-sanctioned or government entities in Argentina. This is in Argentina, so it's extraordinary again. This particular government entity mentioned the whales, but showed you the same 2 pictures that most of the media showed you. The other National Scientific Technical Research Council in Argentina had no mention of the die-offs, and the only mention of killer whales was this particular story from 2014. And so all the media was showing you basically these pictures. Close-ups were like this, which gave you zero context. And it's extraordinary because we cover this every few weeks, every month, year after year after year after year after year. We've covered the die-off of the species. And you go to my playlist, you'll see a very long And it's not a complete list, but a very long list of videos that we have produced detailing the documentation available of the species die-offs post-Fukushima. And so when you see pictures like this, it's very suspect. This picture here, the whale's tail, you can see it's clearly emaciated. That's the first hint we had. There was one story that showed up that actually gave us close-up, a very high-quality picture instead of a very grainy picture. This was the only one that showed up, which is absurd. You see all these people on the beaches? Clearly, somebody took pictures. And in a day where everybody has a very high-quality camera, it's extraordinary not to have any pictures. This was the only picture that we got so far, and this happened a week ago, so there's no excuses. This picture is clearly showing us a emaciated killer whale. You can see the depressed body, the rib cages. You can see the shoulder blades. This is not a normal, healthy-looking killer whale in any shape or forms. So, but that's all we got so far. We got no details. We got assertions from institutions that didn't put any documentation up on their sites whatsoever. We have 6 media reports that are barely reports that basically all regurgitated the exact paragraphs and pictures, except for one was this particular picture. Despite the fact we know for a fact that a lot of people had showed up. Researchers predict the West Coast killer whales will exceed 1,000 atoms a kilogram of radioactive cesium. Over 10 times the government's limit. Well, they keep raising the limits. It was 0.5 becquerels, and the becquerel is a pulse of energy from an atom. So you got to have an atom in order to have a pulse of energy. So 1,000 atoms per kilogram. These are extraordinary numbers because each atom is pulsing energy at the speed of light, destroying chromosomes, cells, DNA in the animals and humans. And their bodies will attack it with white blood cells for the rest of their life and try to fix the damage every second. It can't keep up with that. When you're talking about symmetrically throughout the whole body, and people eating large amounts of fish may have levels similar to the whales, 1,000 atoms per kilogram. These are catastrophic. There's incredible amount of diseases, illnesses, autoimmune deficiencies, injuries. Killer whales dying along the Pacific coast, very sick, emaciated. Now, this is 2014, post-Fukushima. Steep decline began after Fukushima. No babies had been born in the previous 2 years. They've seen incredible behaviors observed in social structures that were splintering. Reactors melted down. It's hard to comprehend the enormity of a reactor melting down and how it connects to the whales. We're going to walk you through that. The fall affects every species, every human, every animal, every mammal, all the biota, all the plants, trees, all the pollen. There is nothing with an autoimmune trigger that can defend against a radioactive fallout. So when it covers the entire planet, brother, we have a problem. Trust me. And don't trust me, I'll provide you the documentation. And what's even more frightening is we're the only people reporting on it. And I'm a bit slow. We couldn't do a show last night. I had a headache. I couldn't get into it. I wanted to. I tried to. I had everything ready to go. And I won't be back until Thursday. I'll be back on hopefully Thursday, and we'll get another show in. And there's nothing I can do about it. How scientists discovered 7,000 humpback whale deaths using AI technology. This is 7,000 extra humpback on top of a unusual mortality event. So this is an extra 7,000 whales post-Fukushima. This is 2024. They're trying to blame the mass die-off of all whales on ship strikes and entanglement. And it's true, it does happen. It happened before Fukushima. But when you look at the numbers worldwide, there was 1,200 reports since a worldwide database was launched in 2007. And then not every whale died from that collision, so-called collision. Dead whales are hazardous to navigation. So a lot of ship strikes are because the whales are dead and they're drifting and they get hit by, because I used to fish, I grew up in a community with no automobiles. And so we lived the way of the ocean. There was a mountain surrounding you. Your house were built on rocks. My house was built on stilts. Half of it was hanging over the water, so you would just scrape your dinner plate out the window at high tide. So I know a few things about this. He said it's a hazard, and I was a commercial diver for 14 years. 6 hours a day on the ocean floor. So I know a few things, more than the typical mouthpiece for the nuclear industry knows, I'm pretty sure. He said it is a hazard to navigation. So recently in 2023, 10 billion snow crab vanished. They didn't vanish, they didn't go turn to fairy dust. They died. They most likely didn't rot very quickly because that's what we're seeing with the species. Mass die-offs could become more common in the future. Well, only for a while, and then they'll be gone, right? The loss encompassed more than 90% of the Bering Sea snow crab population, the most important commercial crab industry worldwide, apparently, and nearly 4 times the combined total number of snow crabs harvested by fisheries from 1977 to 2022. So the total combined harvest was 4 times that disappeared. And crabs, of course, are floor dwellers. And that's where a lot of radioactive fallout ends up too. And contaminated species, when they die, they're bioaccumulated so much radiation, they'll end up on the ocean floor, right? Dead whale spotted near Block Island, and that was supposed to be this one here, so a dead whale, they acknowledge, is a hazard to navigation. And the reason it's considered a hazard to navigation is because ships have struck a lot of dead whales that were already dead, not alive. It's very difficult to strike a live whale. And we used to work on the ocean 6 days a week. And many days there were 6, 7, 8, 9,000 whales alongside of me when I was heading home. And my big fear was I was going to hit one of the whales, and because I got seasick every day, they still had to do the work. These were hook and line and gill net boats we're talking about. And so my hands were cracked. Every line in my hand was cracked open and bleeding for most of my life when I was working on the Atlantic Ocean. I became a commercial diver later, and that was a full dry suit, which is a total different environment that I grew up in. But everybody would laugh at me because nobody ever hit a whale. And you're talking about all these fishing boats. It was considered ludicrous to suggest you could hit a whale. And back in them days, there was a lot more than there is now. The whale die-offs you can trace back to the nuclear testing where you contaminated the entire planet. It was a nuclear war. They called it nuclear testing. So 2023, a washed-up orca on the Belgian beach, and the autopsy could not find the cause of death. Does that sound familiar? But when you look at the whale, you're looking at the rib cage, you're looking at the shoulder blades, you're looking at the complete deflation of the animal, you're looking at the incredible skinny tail. There's no blubber, no muscle mass left. Severe emaciation, right? And we've never seen that in history pre-Fukushima with killer whales. They're the apex predator. They eat an incredible amount of species. And to see such a magnificent creature be sacrificed, and the nuclear industry with the ability to cover it up. So what the nuclear industry has demonstrated to us worldwide now is they're willing to sacrifice every species, every plant, every animal, every tree, every insect, every beautiful creature and human on the planet so they can survive a bit longer. There's nothing on the planet that has an autoimmune trigger that can defend against man-made radiation fallout. It's considered 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. So think about how that's applicable to the microscopic world, the most important species, the biota and everything else, the fungus, the bacteria in your forests and your fields, your meadows. 2017, 2019 meek whale unusual mortality event. So it's very recognized that we see in post-Fukushima a lot of unusual mortality events. The cold-water beak whales, there's over 1,000 of them in just a single year in the United Kingdom, where they don't even belong. And they were in different stages of decomposition. Now, scientists estimate that you only find, at best, if you're on a really good day, 10% of the species whales that died. So every time you see a number, multiply it by 10, including for these killer whales we're currently talking about tonight. Today, well, this is daytime. This is I started the show 11 a.m. my time. And matriarch of well-known orca family is starving to death. So post-Fukushima, this is, why would a species, an apex species, that is predatory and is known to feed on over 240 species, showing up emaciated worldwide? Why would that happen? Like, I can understand a little bit how the big whales, which are dependent upon the phytoplankton, the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestration chain, showing up emaciated, after a major nuclear accident. It's hard to comprehend how a killer whale can do it when we know there's still species out there. And as I showed you earlier, they bioaccumulate radiation. They can't uptake nutrition no more. They're producing more white blood cells than red blood cells. They have cancer of the blood, right? Alaska seabird, and what I'm trying to do first is I'm going to introduce you to recent die-offs, post-Fukushima, to show you a pattern, and show you, unfortunately, a pattern of starvation, symmetrical throughout all the species. Alaska seabird die-off continues for another summer. This was the common murres. Common murres will dive 600 feet all day to feed on anchovies and squid and sardines and krill and small keystone species. We're also seeing large, grizzly bears. Now, I've actually done research on these beaches. These bears are grizzly bears, believe it or not, which are supposed to be the big bears for North America. And they mostly feed not on salmon, but on berries and grubs and grass but they can feed on black bears. They can eat elk. They can eat deer. They can eat moose, and they do. And so, why would they show up emaciated? Well, they eat roughly in 200,000 berries a day, and berries, of course, bioaccumulate a lot of radiation. So they're trying to blame it on the salmon. Right, and they're conflating the bears with no salmon. Well, the bears are not dependent upon salmon. They eat many different species, and including berries and stuff like that, right? And what it is, they bioaccumulate so much radiation, they can't uptake nutrition no more. That seems to be, that's the only one I can come up with. That's my theory. And it's based up on really good science, unfortunately. I wish I was wrong. Grizzly bears are bearing the brunt of it. Why would grizzly bears, if the salmon are missing, which is just a fraction of their actual diet, why would that cause such a devastating impact on their health? Mysterious mass death of Alaska birds baffles scientists. Tens of thousands of the birds are washing up on the beaches of Alaska. The birds, known as the common murres, appeared to starve to death. It was over 1 million of them during that period. Their stomachs are empty, they're emaciated, and we know they're starving, their stomachs are empty. The Cassini auklets, we'll cover that in a few minutes, also showed up at the same time. And when I get to that story, I'll tell you why that's such a crazy facet of the story. 20,000 birds just starved to death off the Dutch coast. See, these starved to death, and nobody knows why. Every time you hear the same thing. A lot of times they'll show you a picture of an emaciated animal, and they say, well, we don't know why it died, but they won't mention the word emaciation because they're trying to normalize it. Because all the species die off have that one attribute in common. Alaska adds krill and mussels to the list of unusual marine deaths. And mussels are krill, of course, they're shrimps, right, without the backbones. And they're very important because they can live for 10 years and they travel very long distances. So the migratory species have them as a keystone species for food, right on the migratory routes. The mussels are attached to rocks, and they're very visible. And you would see that all the way from Vancouver, all the way from Mexico, California, all the way up through Canada and into Alaska. If the rock got nothing else, it would be covered in mussels. The coastlines are stripped. We know we've done 6 years of research expeditions, 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean. I'll show you some of that coming up, hopefully, if I remember. Alaska adds krill and mussels to the list. Another die-off species is sperm whales. We've never seen anything like it. And we followed through with these stories over long periods because a lot of time the information doesn't come out for a year or two. And so we got a tendency to pay attention. I do. And when we get a diagnosis of, we'll share that with everybody. Of course, sperm whales are huge whales. They eat mostly the deep divers. They feed on squid and large squid at that. They were showing up in groups, emaciated. 10 sperm whales here, 6 sperm whales there, 14 sperm whales in Australia last year, for instance, sperm whales all over the coastline. Whales won't stop killing themselves in New Zealand. This is 2018. So this was pilot whales. And pilot whales do have a small history of dying, mass strandings and dying by proxy. There is a history there. That history now, and that was the only species we've seen that happen to, but there's more to that story than most people are able to appreciate. These die-offs are the nuclear age, which goes back 80 years. And so, just one of the bombs, there's over 2,000 nuclear weapons set off, but that's not a good way to look at it. If you do it in kilotons, the equivalent of Nagasaki or Hiroshima, you're looking at around 33,000 nuclear weapons have been set off. 33,000. If two countries exchange a nuclear weapon each, that's considered a nuclear war because of the radioactive fallout. So what is 33,000 nuclear weapons equal to? It's when no species on the planet has an autoimmune trigger to defend against the fallout. These whales, and there was another 400 whales, there was 600 total at the one time. And then there's the story in 2000, and we covered all of these stories, 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17 in particular. The pilot whales, they were doing necropsies, animal autopsies back then. They don't do them, they don't report on them post-2017. Necropsies performed on 8 whales that died on Lover's Key on Monday. Tuesday showed the animals had empty stomachs. It's not very difficult. You don't have to wait a year or 6 months or 2 years for the results because when they cut it open, they know if the stomachs are full or empty, right? And they also know how much blubber is there. They stopped reporting on that around 2016-17. So the animals all had empty stomachs, but there was another die-off that week of, I think it was 30. The whales that died in the Everglades, which are pilot whales, also had empty stomachs. There was a humpback unusual mortality event. There was over 7,000 extra ones that I showed you on top of the unusual mortality event. And because we covered this extensively for so long, an absurd amount of them were severe emaciation. the same thing with the grey whales. The grey whales, in fact, there's 14,000 died post-Fukushima. There's 13,000 left. They're all emaciated. I'll show you that coming up. Manatees now officially under an unusual mortality event. 30 whales found dead in an unusual mortality event in Alaska. Clearly emaciated on top of that. We covered all of these stories, of course. This story was 2025. Grey whale die-off fear to starving whales, emaciated whales, travel north. Thousands of grey whales, which is 13,000. The entire species is 13,000. And last year they were all emaciated. This year they're still emaciated. So last year they headed south. There was no babies survived. This year they're headed north. They're late leaving. They're late everywhere they go. They're showing up in places they've never been before. And the ones that are dying off are clear emaciations. The media is trying to conflate it with ship strikes. So suggesting that all of the whales are committing suicide is the only way that theory can work. Which is simply not true.
What would you like to convert from?
I didn't say that there, Siri. Now migrating north from Baja, California are in such poor shape, that was this year, researchers believe the poor condition due to changing feeding conditions. Well, these whales are following a migratory route that millions of generations have followed before. It's built into their DNA, right? It's the same thing for the species that they would feed upon. And the species that they feed upon are the phytoplankton, the zooplankton, microscopic animals. The microscopic animals are everywhere. They're not just like a migratory species. They're everywhere. They're on the surface of all fresh water and seawater, in the top surface water. So to suggest that there is a changing feeding condition is, when it comes to that particular species, is to suggest, which is accurate, that the species are no longer there. It's not that the species don't go somewhere else. They've been doing these migratory routines and these reproduction cycles for millions of generations. The whales were already in poor shape last fall when they began their 12,000-mile migration to breeding. They were emaciated when they began their 12,000-mile trip last year, when they began it, 12,000 miles. They're still emaciated. The whales we are seeing are extremely emaciated. This is the gray whales in particular. Bulging ribs with shoulder blades and vertebrae visible even from the shore. And the mothers are likely too unhealthy to birth and feed the healthy babies. Well, why would you put the word healthy babies there for? An emaciated mother doesn't have a healthy baby. The babies are emaciated, are severe, dehydrated, malnourished, and everything else. I usually turn the audio down so you don't hear that big slurp, but I didn't. My apologies. Emaciated. All the gray whales are emaciated. Because you can't have half the whales emaciated, the other half not emaciated, because they all eat the same food. Starvation caused a mass bird deaths, great shearwaters. No highly pathogenic avian influenza was found. So this was in 2022, when they were trying to conflate the mass species die-off out of the blue with avian influenza. This particular mass species die-off was in the middle of the so-called avian influenza. Now, the avian influenza assertions come from a single government laboratory where states, counties, countries are sending their birds to the same government laboratory. They done their own research, their own laboratories, and no highly pathogenic avian influenza was found. And that the state label of dead birds they examined as emaciated. We've seen the same thing here in the Atlantic, where we had over 1 million common murres and approximately the same of the dovekites, which are microscopic eaters. And the common murres are divers, right? They feet 600 feet down all day. There's nothing to it. And so to have two different spectrums of the food chain showing up emaciated is truly the most frightening thing you can imagine. All were emaciated. The consensus is they died of starvation. They were also trying to blame in Peru a mass species die-off of sea lions with the bird flu. Now, bird flu has been around for millions of generations. It's never jumped species. The species have always bounced back and recovered from it no matter... It's been going on forever, so to call, right? Now, their immune system are compromised, so yes, they could be more susceptible to pathogens or viruses. So this is not bird flu, this is emaciation. This takes many, many months to become emaciated. These animals are usually 700, 800, 900, 1,000 pounds. What you're looking at there is not even 100 pounds. And there was two different pictures. Here's another picture. It was 3,500 sea lions they were trying to say died of bird flu. In reality, though, and this picture is going to be hard to look at, this is severe starvation. I've never seen, and I wouldn't even know what that was if I seen it on the beach. And I was a commercial diver who dove with sea lions every day, 300 days a year. So to see this is bizarre. And then to suggest that avian influenza has this particular attribute is borderline ludicrousness, and that the population is so dumbed down that there's no pushback is even worse. I mean, look, and the idea of that story was to condition people into thinking when they seen emaciated animals and to call it bird flu. That's what that was all about. There's 3,500 sea lions didn't die from bird flu, they died from starvation. 8 dead sperm whales found on a German beach. So I'm trying to build a pattern before we get into the recent 26 killer whales that have died. Excuse me. Let me keep her going here. These sperm whales, by the way, all the sperm whales we've been following have been starvation events. And we've never seen... Pre-Fukushima, the odds of finding 2 dead sperm whales, or 2 dead whales on a beach was considered bizarre. It couldn't happen. Now, if it don't get 2 dead whales on a beach, there's something wrong. 2 more sperm whales wash up dead, and you can see the peanut head there, for instance, which is emblematic of starvation. You see the defined lines? This was in 2015. Yeah, 2015. 337 sei whales. These are huge whales, by the way. And clearly this was a starvation event too. This was the largest die-off of any whales in human history. And it was given very little prominence whatsoever. 50 tons. So whenever you get the really big whales, phytoplankton, zooplankton is a large fraction of their diets. And Fukushima broke the food chain. Gray whales dying off the Pacific coast, and scientists aren't sure why. Well, there was starvation. At least 70 whales perished since the start of the year in the shallow lagoons of Mexico, Baja, California. Now we know it's starvation. The lowest numbers, now they didn't survive the migratory route, any of the babies, as skinny and malnourished. We call it emaciation, starvation. Not calling it starvation, not calling it emaciated is on purpose. They were told to avoid using those 2 words. We didn't see a single southbound calf, which has never happened in 40 years. And they only got 60 calves right now. They're headed south. Others believe it could be from a lack of food, which is the phytoplankton and zooplankton, based on the depleted conditions in which some of the whales were found. They were all found in that. Not some of the whales, but all of them. And lack of food based on a depleted condition. That's a connotation. That's a framing of the narrative that I've never actually heard before. And we cover this all year long, year after year after year after year, these die-offs. I've never heard that particular narrative. There's someone being creative. You can see it in the photographs, the skinny whales. They're not. And the word skinny is very unusual too. It's usually emaciated or starving. But since 2017, they've become way more creative. I poke a hole in the eye first here. Excuse me. The thick, fat pad that typically covers the area beyond the skull is gone, and we call it a peanut head. And you shouldn't see a whale's shoulder blades. That's important stuff for later. Observation of malnutrition and skinniness. Again, it should be emaciation and starvation, not malnutrition and skinniness. It's a very bizarre connotation. In the whales and similar events, the observation in Arctic animals, including birds, seals, crabs, and fish. Many of the whales started feeding in areas such as San Francisco Bay, where they're getting hit by ships because that's a big shipping area, that big bay, right? But the reason is because they're emaciated, they can't get out of the way, or they're dead and just floating around. And they've never seen them in San Francisco Bay pre-Fukushima. They don't belong there, they've never been there. Now you might see 10, 20 there at a time because they smell the sewage. They're desperate for any kind of food, and they eat the microscopic animals for the most part, which such behavior has never before been seen, which is San Francisco. And so now getting hit by ships is no be surprised because the captains in that are not used to having whales in that environment. And the whales that are there, and we've covered almost every one of them that have died post-Fukushima. When you finally get a clean picture, it's emaciated. Not most of the time, but all the time. In the last 2 weeks, several gray whales observed in San Francisco Bay, including a record high of 9 on a single day. Right, they were emaciated last year on their migratory run. No babies survived. They're emaciated this year, and they might not make it next year. We are not expecting them next year. 14,000 died post-Fukushima, and everyone that we've seen pictures of is starvation. The industry is out there desperately trying to blame everything and anything, and their garbage can diagnosis is climate change, which is 80 years of emission from the nuclear industry, pulsing energy at the speed of light, and it never goes away. 80 years of those releases from 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. In the last 2 weeks, several gray whales have been observed in San Francisco Bay, including a near record high of 9 on a single day. Reports from Mexico indicate many gray whales migrate further south than they typically do. Now, they've never changed their migratory pattern in millions of generations. But post-Fukushima, we see that food-stressed whales. This is not creative, it's outrageous omission. It's unmitigated omission is what we're seeing with these particular narratives. Food-stressed whales, given their body conditions, the emaciation. So refusing to use the word emaciation or starving does not mean they're not emaciated and starving. Seabirds found emaciated and starved. That was 6 years. Official recorded death of fork-tailed storm petrels. We have the biggest migratory colony, breeding pairs, 3.3 million breeding pairs here on the East Coast of storm petrels on Baccalieu Island. And I went out there 2019 multiple times, 2020 multiple times, 2021 multiple times. And the last 2 years, my boat has been broke down. We can't afford to repair or replace the engine. Well, the engine's been to Alaska 6 times for 4 to 5 months at a time. It's just worn out. And I'm doing whatever I can to try to get back out there. But we have very, 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 very little support. And I'm doing the best I can. And I've been at this for a very long time. And It's just unconscionable that we're not able to do the field studies. Officials recorded the deaths of the storm petrels, fulmars, the northern fulmars, the shearwaters, the kittiwakes. They look like small seagulls. The Cassini auklets and the puffins. There was around 300 puffins found in Alaska a few years back. Scientists estimated because of that number and their history of finding dead birds that at least half the population had died. Now we know it's much worse than that. Now we know that most of the colonies are now gone. Oceans are already contaminated with a full deluge of Fukushima toxic water. We'll stop eating fish from the west coast. Cesium at 1,000% normal levels in the middle of the Pacific. Well, you can't just have cesium. Isotopes, that's the cover story. It's a nasty isotope, but that's the cover story. Too much junk food tied to a massive seabird die-off. Junk food. Not what you're thinking. It was a completely dishonest and deceptive thing to say, by the way. They're talking about the Cassini auklets. Starvation as the cause of death between 250,000, 500,000 Cassini auklets. In the late 2014, 2015, I was out doing research expeditions at that time for 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean doing species counts. So there was 1.4 million Cassini auklets roughly in that period, and 1 million common murres. The common murres, they're diving 600 feet all day and feeding anchovies and squid and sardines and krills and sardines, whatever. The Cassini auklets are preying on microscopic animals, phytoplankton, zooplankton. So 2 different spectrums of the food chain showing up emaciated. That is the most frightening. We have now officially destroyed our planet, and we're watching the death of a species. And like the first one now that's really going to stand, because the whales stand out, they're so big, right? And there's so people whale watching is a big industry in every country. But what we're going to see for the gray whales is they're going to disappear somewhere in the next 12 months to 18 months. They'll be completely gone. The 13,000 that are left are all emaciated last year and are barely functional this year. They're so emaciated. The rib cages are standing out. You can see the peanut head, the shoulder blades. We found to be smaller, the Cassini auklets, less abundant than previous year, forcing the seabirds, the krill and copepods, the zooplankton, forcing the seabirds to eat less nutritional junk food. So because first off, the zooplankton can't get any smaller. The krill certainly can. The copepods can't get any smaller. And so the krill is about the only species that can get smaller. Instead of the usual nutrient, energy-rich prey. So the problem is the phytoplankton and the copepods are bioaccumulating radiation, and they eat a lot of that. They're skimmers, right? Like the storm petrels, they're eating the microscopic animals. So, by the way, the storm petrels here on the East Coast have disappeared. There's still some left, but instead of having 3.3 million on this island, which is an absurd amount, they're nocturnal, by the way. So I used to have to go out there at nighttime. I couldn't find any, and I would be out there till after daylight. And so I'm out there with the spotlight, with the searchlight going all night long, looking for any returning storm petrels. We also have 46 million migratory birds total, seabirds, the biggest migratory route on the entire planet, are missing, and they would come here to raise their fledglings. They're missing. Four more mass mortality events involving seabirds took place, occurring further north each time. The murres, the puffins, most recently short-tailed shearwaters, northern fulmars, experienced a similar fate of the auklets, the Cassini auklets, which is starvation. The Cassini auklet story is really the opener of a saga of multiple seabird die-offs that are unprecedented as far as we know. U.S. biologists probed the death of 70 emaciated gray whales. 70, and this was a very interesting story because this is one of the few times they acknowledge instead of saying some, because they got a tendency to say some of the whales are skinny, or some of the whales are malnourished, or some of the whales are emaciated, which is very rare for them to use that word anymore. Because they were using it in every story, and we were able to pick up on that and show this consistency, this symmetrics. 70 gray whales washed ashore in recent months along the U.S. West Coast from California to Alaska. And they say many of them are emaciated. No, they're all emaciated. Unusual dead orca found on Christchurch Beach. This was this year, June the 26th. So this was an orca from her condition. She may have been struggling to feed. This is not struggling to feed. This is severe emaciation. You can count the rib cages. The tail behind me is flat. These are not normal. This is nothing normal about that animal. That's severe emaciation you're looking at. And you can see the peanut head if you know what you're looking at. And the tail is, Fukushima really did happen. The media came out and pretend they're on top of that reactor 150 feet above it. Why would you think the biggest medias on the planet, and this is just a fraction of them, would pretend they're on top of the reactor? The reason being is because the nuclear industry is very powerful. It owns most of the media, and it doesn't want you to appreciate the fact that they're the reason of the mass species extermination. This is an extinction event worldwide. Here we go. So that was a preamble to introduce you to the fact that this is normal. This is not normal pre-Fukushima, but this is normal post-Fukushima. Mystery is 26 killer whales wash up dead on the beach, and scientists don't know why. And as I showed you earlier, and I'll show you again coming up, the whales are all emaciated. So these pictures here, you see the whales in the background? And they're very careful not to give you a good shot, but you can see the peanut head on that to your left one. But this was the same pictures released everywhere. There was just a couple of them. This was, I zoomed in on. And you see the whales all there, they've been dead for a while. Now, a team of marine biologists investigating the mysterious. Well, it's not mysterious if you look at everything I already showed you. Now it makes sense. The radioactive fallout covered the whole planet, broke the food chain. Mysterious mass strandings of orcas in Argentina, the biggest mass die-off in history. Right, this is the biggest mass die-off in human history of killer whales. And I got 16 people on my show. I got 22 likes. I got 2 comments. Really? That's what I got on my show that I've been doing for over a decade straight. Did 26 orcas die of starvation because Fukushima massive radioactive fallout destroyed the food chain? We got 22 likes, but only 16 votes. With no sign of injury or trauma. Oh, well, what could it be, I wonder? This was the Xenon 133 covering the planet. I apologize, I'm not myself recently. I'm not the healthiest person on the planet. With no sign of injury or trauma. Specialists at the National Scientific Technical Research Council in the Southern Center for Scientific Investigation. I visited both of those sites. I'll show you that. I already did, but I'll show it to you again coming up. We're notified. And this is in Argentina. San Sebastian Bay in Argentina. You can see Buenos Aires, Argentina. And then I'll give you a wider expansion. Zoom in and zoom out. So you can see in relative. So Japan is up there in the corner. San Sebastian Bay in September. Weeks after initial discovery, park rangers spotted more stranded orcas in a difficult-to-access area further north of San Sebastian Bay. So because this happened, this was in September, so how come we never heard about it till now? Like when a killer whale dies, there's typically 30, 40, or 50 medias minimum, and then originally we'll come out with the story, and then there's another 40 or 50 medias over the next 2 weeks will run the story. This happened in September, and we're only hearing about it in the middle of October. And then the question is, of course, why are we only getting a couple of pictures after all this time when there's lots of people clearly at the site? You see the people there, right? Weeks after the initial discovery, park rangers spotted more stranded orcas. So this is weeks after. That's why we're finding out about it now. In a difficult-to-access area further north of San Sebastian Bay. The total number of stranded individuals stands at 26. Now, they figured they all died at the same time, 2 weeks ago or so. But we never heard about the other two, is what I'm talking about. And so now we got 24 more dead whales. So who knows how many actually died? You typically only find 10% of the whales, because the ocean is a big place, and a lot of them sink, right? And they're very intelligent animals. Based on how decomposed they were, two specialists believe the largest group is stranded at the same time as the two found earlier, which was several weeks ago. And this picture is very puzzling because you don't get any context. You can see it literally has no blubber, though. Believed to be and blubber is it can endure for a very long time. And there was no predators. There's another thing you notice about these whales. No predators. No hanger-on, no birds in the background. No predators hanging out. Believed to be the third known stranding worldwide, with previous sightings recorded in 1955 in New Zealand, when 17 orcas stranded at a beach there. Well, 1955 was 10 years after they started detonating nuclear weapons, and the radioactive fallout had broken the food chain, or disrupted the food chain significantly. You know, the Soviet Union's biggest single bomb was equal to 4,000 Nagasaki's exploding at one time. So the radioactive fallout is unbelievable to the biosphere, to the insects, to the mammals, animals, birds, and humans worldwide. You can trace the decline of all species to the nuclear open-air testing, and everything underground was vented straight into the environment. There's no, they'd done it underground, but you cracked the earth open and vented out. When you watch those videos, you'll appreciate what I'm talking about. It's absurd. And now whenever it rains, that washes down into the cavern, the radioactive caverns, and then it permeates down into the water tables as radioactive water. It's just an evil industry, no matter how you look at it. The recent incident is believed to be the third known stranding worldwide, when 70 orcas were stranded in the middle of the nuclear testing, 10 years after nuclear testing started. So, right, whenever they talk about the die-offs of the whales, they'll go back and say, oh, well, it happened back in this era. But that happens to be the same era as massive releases into the environment with true nuclear weapons. What they don't show you is pre-nuclear industry. So you got to put that into the equation. You can't pretend that didn't happen, that's not a factor. And it's happened twice, and then post-Fukushima in 2022. Orca massacre, the Sun, the UK is just the media, the universities, the governments are literally just monstrous degenerates, aren't they? Scientists baffled as 26 killer whales washed up dead in a mystery mass stranding. See, scientists generally never say they're baffled. They're baffled when emaciation is the reason. That's when we see that word being used. No one knows why. Well, if that's true, then give us a list of all the people that universities and institutions that you're quoting. Autopsies on the killer whales showed no sign of injuries or trauma, which is a favorite thing they'd like to do, is suggest that, and they don't even have to have proof, they'll just suggest, right, that, well, we don't know if there's any injuries or traumas from ship strikes or ropes, because they'll always put the big turd in the punch bowl, right? Scientists have been left baffled, even though there's only 1,200 ship strikes pre-Fukushima. Not all of them would have died. Scientists have been left baffled after 26 orcas mysteriously washed up dead on the beach. So they always give you these far pictures. You can see the emaciation, though, in the tail right there. And that's very telling. Now, they did have pictures of the original two, the first two they found, right, 2 weeks before it. And I showed you that picture of that whale, and I'm going to show it to you again. Clear emaciation. This led scientists to believe they weren't involved in collisions with vessels. Really? Are you suggesting 26 whales were hit by ships at the one time? By using that statement, by using those connotations, by framing it that way? Like, why would they say it that way? Because the industry is very controlled, and the media are just not your friends at all. This led scientists believe they weren't involved in collisions with vessels at sea or caught in fishing nets. Really, 26 dead whales, and that's what you're going to tell us. That's your... Scientists are baffled, but you got an opinion, and your opinion is so worthless. Journalists that regurgitate that particular narrative should lose their degrees. And then why did he show you this picture for? Based on the decomposition of the animals, it's been widely agreed the majority of the group washed up ashore at the same time. The majority of the group. So the majority of the group, really, did others wash in later in the exact same spot? Is that what you're suggesting? You really, the United Kingdom media is just hideous. It's hideous. You would never, I would never search it out just to look for news. What really surprised us in this case was the number of specimens in total. So what a disconnect, eh? And consummate spokesperson, this is Argentina's spokesperson, who showed us the same two pictures as the media worldwide used. We've never recorded so many stranded animals before. Perhaps animals that enter at high tide or when the tide goes out quickly can become stranded. Maybe their underwear got caught on a rock. Maybe that's what happened to the whales and they got stuck there. Maybe a UFO come down and impregnated them and they got stuck there. Maybe Bigfoot was hanging onto their tail and they couldn't swim away. So there was 26 Bigfoots showed up and grabbed all the whales by the tail, waited for the tide to go out, and then laughed at it and went on home out of it and ate some berries. Can become stranded if you're not familiar with the area. As the tide goes out quickly, first off, killer whales are experts at going on beaches. To suggest that the whales have the intelligence of a jellyfish is insulting. A jellyfish is about the only species that will ever get stuck in the low tide. If they're not familiar with the area, oh really? So they're basically saying the whales don't belong there on top of that. We've never recorded so many stranded animals before, so then why now would it all of a sudden happen? So if it never happened before, why would you say maybe they got stranded because they're not familiar with the area? No, they're tourists, Dana. They'd never been here. They decided to come over and visit Argentina for a change. 26 dead orcas wash ashore in Argentina as scientists struggle to pinpoint what killed them. And media doesn't make it easy for you to work it out. The largest stranding of dead orcas ever. And it gets no prominence whatsoever. 6 stories, and I listed them below, and I'm going to show you all the reports. An investigation to their death will entail cutting them open, checking their organs for signs of internal injuries. So you think they all got internal injuries? Really? 26 whales got internal injuries, do they? They all got struck by a boat. A boat is out there chasing whales down and beating them up. Normally when you say cut them open, you're checking, the first thing you say is checking their stomachs, and not their internal organs. Avoiding anything to do with their starvation or emaciation or health is quite interesting. Like what they're pointing their fingers at everything but the obvious. All the other whales are already died of. Scientists baffled as 26 killer whales died in mysterious mass strandings. Well, get rid of them. They're not scientists. They're morons. These studies will determine whether the event is due to natural causes, really, or reflects a concerning change in the marine ecosystem. Well, ain't that the interesting statement of the day? Or reflects a concerning change in the marine ecosystem. Why would you go from daylight to dark? I wonder. Or reflects a concerning change in the marine ecosystem / starvation, right? They sit atop the food chain and have a diverse diet consisting of fish, penguins, sea lions. There's actually 240 species. And so why would they invoke that particular facet too? Rare mass stranding, Orcas stranding, in Argentina, 26 killer whales found dead. And to show you this picture, this was the original pictures from 2 weeks before. That's an emaciated whale. A rare mass Orcas stranding. It's not a rare mass. Well, for Argentina, it's a rare one. It's the biggest die-off in history ever, in history of killer whales. And we got 15 people on my show on YouTube, the biggest platform on the planet, where I've been doing a show typically 5 days a week for over a decade. I've been doing this for 24 years on top of that. So I guess I'm pretty naive. But you take a student in the university and give them incredible prominence who has no experience whatsoever. This is an emaciated whale. You can see the peanut head at the top over right there. I don't know about you on your screen, but you can clearly see it on my screen. You can see the shoulder blades and the rib cages sticking up. Simply not normal. Why are we getting such a limit, small, like a fraction of pictures you would normally get? You think when you got 26 dead whales, you get at least 26 pictures. You know what I mean? Like, these are killer whales. So whoever went there and took one picture surely took more than one picture. Right? And showing you this picture to the average person doesn't mean much. But if you're familiar with the body shape and how this whole thing works, you know that's an emaciated whale. The total number of killer whales that have been stranded is now 26, the researcher added. See, and using the word stranded is very deceptive. Stranded is typically, when you're stranded, you call some tow truck or something to come fix your tire or give you a boost or get you gas or tow you somewhere, right? That's the word stranded for us. For these animals, they're dead. Autopsies mean dead, which is bizarre because they normally use the word necropsy, not autopsy. Have not yet indicated any traces of trauma or injuries. Thus, the cause is still unknown. So why would you invoke trauma and injuries when you're talking about 26 whales? Or you're talking about 26 whales? Do you really think 26 whales is going to be trauma. Autopsies have not yet indicated any traces of trauma or injuries, thus the cause is unknown. So if it's not trauma or injuries, then we can't come up. Well, what about their body health? Like, why would you take most of the pictures are long-range pictures where you got no detail, right? You got no concept of the conditions. And then why wouldn't you take 26 pictures when you obviously could? Clearly, if they can walk to that whale, they would have walked to the other one, the other one, the other one, the other one. They would have took pictures. When I find whales on a beach, dead whales, I'm typically taking 800 plus 1,000 or more pictures. Every angle you can imagine. This is every angle you can imagine. Killer whales are top predators, an important sign of the health of the marine ecosystem. That's an interesting narrative. And they eat a wide range of animals. There's actually around 240 species, including birds, such as fish, penguins, sea lions, halibut, octopus, you name it. Or if it means that the ecosystem is changing in a bad way. Well, that's a really interesting connotation now, isn't it? Their point, that's another definitive point, that's starvation without mentioning the word. Well, when you look at the health of the whale, that's starvation. That's emaciated. It's not malnutrition, that's not skinny, that's starvation. These are bloated. But when you see the tail, you clearly know this is an emaciated animal. But the majority of the pictures that was in the media were like this. This is bizarre pictures when you should have at least 26 pictures. 26 whales, you'd think you would get 26 pictures. Am I lunatic? Am I insane to even suggest that? And then this picture is bizarre. This picture showed up in at least 3 of the stories. Well, you can clearly see there's no blubber. You can see a peanut head on that whale there. You got a shadow on this one. It's very bad quality picture on top of that. You can see that the tail is absolutely skinny. It's flat. It's emaciated like that whale, for sure. Southern resident killer whales show signs of slow decline towards its disappearance. That was a couple of days ago. So the British Columbia whales are going to disappear, is what they're saying. The Seattle, British Columbia whales are disappearing. And we know most of the ones that have died of starvation. You can't make stronger measures to protect them. So they're trying to blame the Chinook population. If a killer whale, which happens to like Chinook salmon, absolutely, can't get the salmon, it'll eat something else. That's what hungry animals do. They don't go on a hunger strike. So if they're showing up emaciated, it's not because they didn't have the Chinook. They eat up to 240 species. So they want to blame it on pollution, noise from ships, among other factors driving a decline. How about radioactive fallout breaking the food chain? Why are we getting these long-range pictures with no definition of very low quality? Why? You know, this is the biggest story in history of killer whales. It's the biggest story in history. There's no bigger story in entire history than 26 dead orcas. The apex predator. There's no bigger story in history. And only 6 media is telling the story. We only get these very grainy, bizarre pictures with no concept, no ability. Mystery mass stranding leaves 26 killer whales dead in Argentina. Killer whales known as orcas are apex predators. If they're apex predators, why are the majority we see dying of starvation? The unusual mass stranding has been puzzling scientists around the entire planet. Well, then, if that's true, then why don't we see them talking about it in media. And they are seeking to understand what happened. If that's true, why don't we see any of those connotations of any of the stories? Why do we see 6 stories with the same narrative for the same pictures? Why don't we see the scientists out there asking the question, raising, getting interviewed? The incident is special worrying for researchers. If that's true, why don't we see the word researchers talking about it? Because I looked everywhere. They seek to establish if the stranding was natural or indicates a shift in the marine ecosystem. Well, why would you put that particular narrative there? It can only be one or the other, can it? So they're pointing towards starvation with that connotation, right? The framing it that way is alluding to starvation and emaciation. Autopsies, and which is bizarre that they would use that word, necropsies, and everybody knows that's how all the media is, instead of using the word they typically use, which is necropsy, are using the word autopsies, found to indicate no trauma or injuries to the killer whales. To suggest that 26 killer whales were hit by ships is absurd. Why would you put that in the story when it's absurd to suggest 26 whales got injured at the one time and all washed up on the same beach? Do you know what the odds of that actually are? You got better chances of getting hit by a Soviet satellite in the left-hand side of your right eyeball in the next millisecond. Is better odds than 26 whales getting hit, injured, and showing up on the same beach at the one time. Maybe they ran out of toilet paper and they got dysentery and diarrhea and pneumonia. Maybe that's why they died. Like 26,000 children die every day because they can't get a couple of pennies worth of salt to cure that. The discovery may offer vital information regarding oceans' well-being. Why would you put that connotation there? And the possible impact of environmental shifts on sea creatures. Right, so they're clearly pointing towards a starvation event. You know, there were 6 stories. That was it, 6 stories. But on Friday, how underwater internet cables could help save the endangered whales. They're talking about killer whales, by the way, which is bizarre. There was probably 70 stories about that, or more. Right, the whole feed, it was something like 14 pages of this story only. But the killer whales, there was only 6 stories. Mystery is 26 killer whales wash up dead on the beach. Scientists don't know why. The National Technical Research Council, which was quoted in every story, on a result for killer whale, you can see I put in search result for killer whale, showed 2014. Do you think they would have had pictures? They were the people that responded. The National Scientific and Technical Research Council. The most useless humans we've ever created. That's what it should say. The Southern Center for Scientific Investigations. So, let me find the other one. There was 2 results, one from 2022 seminar on wrongful convictions. What the hell has that got to do with it? They do have a new deep sea oceanographic vessel. And lots of stories on that. Oh, there's some proud of that boy. That's the pride and joy. They got no time. They got no money or time to spend on stupid killer whales, I guess. The National Scientific Technical Research Council, who went there and investigated, didn't put a single picture up on their website to justify their existence. And the Southern Center for Scientific Investigation, they actually had a story there to your left. And it shows you the stupidest pictures imaginable. Why does those two organizations even exist? And they're listed as the investigative arm of the government, who just got $40 billion from the America administration. $40 billion. I guess they got to pay off all the journalists and universities now to cover up the die-offs that are happening down there. Why are they showing the worst pictures conceivable, the most useless pictures, the most unworthy pictures to post? Why would they even show you that picture there? What was the point of that? Why would they invoke that? Why did they wearing the stupid-looking paper suits for it? So to suggest that 26 whales got struck by ships is kind of, should tell you more than you need to know about what's really going on here. Mystery is 26 whales washed up dead on a beach and scientists don't know why. Why were they showing us that picture? Like, clearly this is emaciation. This is an emaciation event. The whales had starved to death. That's what really happened. It's a starvation event. Hello, everybody. Have a great day, everybody. I'll be back on hopefully Thursday. We're going into the doctor's the next few days, and we'll see on Thursday how, if I'm going to do a show. I'm not sure. I probably will. I'm hoping to anyway. It's going to be hard for me not to. So make sure you share the video, give us a thumbs up, subscribe. Not that anybody will. I'm the least subscribed channel on the internet. I'm ostracized completely. We have 13 people on our show. And the most important subject in human history. And if you go into my playlist, go to my videos and click on playlists. These three videos here, audit of Harvard, MIT, and Stanford University, super important videos. Mass species die-off of whales, birds, insects. This playlist is full of incredible documentation of Fukushima. The species die-off, now I don't have all the videos in this that I've done of die-offs. I have a lot. I have 44 videos. We have 6 people that have used my playlist. I must be the most hated person on the planet. I don't know if anybody is hated more than I am by YouTube and the nuclear industry. I'm absolutely despised by them. They cook every one of my numbers. So if you go through my playlist, what you'll find out is you'll find all of these videos of die-off. So underneath it will be in the descriptions of each of the videos. You'll find a list, as many stories as I can fit there, because you can't get all the die-offs under each video. LA current species die-off, emaciated whales and birds and animals, emaciated whales. This is something that we're really not able to ignore anymore. And so there's an absurd amount of documentation of the die-offs over the years. My site here is only a few years old. He took down my other YouTube channel with 24,000 subscribers when I was out looking for spiders, because apparently that's a crime. Did 26 orcas die of starvation because Fukushima massive radioactive fallout destroyed the food chain? 19 votes, which is pretty humiliating. We just got 3 comments or something. That's pretty humiliating. We got 24 likes. That's humiliating. We got 10 people on the show. The most important story in human history. That's humiliating. But I will never stop. It's humiliating that the world is being snuffed out and people like me are being hid away. I'm not the bad guy. I'm the good guy. The industry is the bad guys. You're the good guy. Okay, so we'll see everybody hopefully Thursday. And we're going to close it out with Yellow Cake Mule. Yellow Cake Mule. Is that James Lewis's site on YouTube? And he's put out a few new videos on the weekend. Excellent songs, folks. I'm going to play Yellow Cake Mule because I got that queued up. And I haven't played it in a while. And what I try to do for James's site is, because I'm only going to play, typically 2 songs, right? One at the beginning of the show, one at the end of the show. And I want to highlight some of his just outstanding work, and then you can discover his other incredible. And he does all the videos, he puts together all the music and the words and lyrics and everything like that, and dedicated to being an arbiter of facts. And you can find him, he's got 435 songs. And we're going to play Yellow Cake Mule. Have a great day, everybody. I'm sorry I'm not on schedule as usual. This happens to me sometimes. I'm not the healthiest person, unfortunately, but I'm doing the best I can do, better than the stupid scientists from Argentina and the rest of the world are doing. We're not cowards. We tell the truth because that's what matters. That's what can change the world for the better. Take care.
Outside to compare. Rental truck, paint strip, tires close to failing. Driver says it's a moving job. It's clearly not. One-day contract to cross the state line, latch draws. No household goods inside. Drums stacked to the ceiling. Plastic torn, heavy powder exposed. Yellow cake baby, yellow cake mule. Interstate haul, not cocaine, not meth, not street contraband. Powder for the core, driven in daylight, truck rolls west. Nothing stops it. Libya, 2011, concrete yard, barrels left in rows, 1,000 tons in storage, fence pulled down. Inspectors went in, counted drum by drum, 10 were missing, 5 were found outside, abandoned in the open, left without a guard. Not contraband, wages measured in uranium, loaded at night. Routes not reported, hidden hand, fuel cycle sustains. AIA looks away, police say nothing. Wrong kind of crime, freight moves west. Looks like moving day. Yellow cake mule, interstate haul, not cocaine, not meth, not street contraband. Powder for the core, driven in daylight, truck rolls west. Nothing stops it. Truck keeps moving. Highway takes it in. No mercy, no break. Only yellow cake mule. Yellow cake mule. you